Dr. Shaila Jamal is an associate professor in the Department of Obstetrics Gynecology in Rajashri Medical Institute, Bareilly. She is the founder and president of Society of Menstrual Disorders and Hygiene Management. She worked as senior resident in School of Medical Sciences and Research, Sharda University, Greater Noida. She received prestigious Award of Excellence by Gramalia at Menstrual Hygiene Summit, New Delhi, India. She has also received an Award of Honor by WHO. Now I invite Ms. Deepa ma'am to address the gathering. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Tejaswini. Hello, everyone. On behalf of Prayana and Tokich Institute of Science and Technology, Kochi, I extend a warm welcome to the speaker of the day, Dr. Shaila Jamal. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome Pinkish Foundation to the Prayana community, and I welcome all the people who are joining here today. Menstruation, as you know, is still a taboo topic in India, but changes are happening at least gradually, and that gives us a lot of hope. Prayana, as you know, mainly focuses on women empowerment, and we are constantly striving to reach the rural women as well as the urban women and empower them in various areas. So today's session I believe will be very relevant to the Prayana community as we are working with young women and older women and young girls of all age groups. So I don't want to take up much of your time. Once again, I welcome the speaker, Dr. Shaila, and welcome you. Please share your valuable insights with our Prayana community. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Deepa ji. I'm indeed honored to be on this platform on behalf of Pinkish to address this August gathering. And yes, I was going through Prayana and I found that in about a section it is written that it is providing a unique opportunity for employability, entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem for women, which is to me something like I have never seen before, supporting in such a different format, like career, which a woman, most of the females, they fail to launch their career, however capable they are. And hats off and kudos to this organization. You're doing such a great job. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
So we would like to be connected in future also. So as Tejaswini told me that we would be talking about menstruation, I will not limit this talk or this session to menstruation, but overall menstrual health and reproductive health of females. So I'll be discussing everything in parts, and if you have any questions, kindly note it down. At the end of session, we can all take it up. So first and foremost, as you have already told that menstruation is a big taboo or topic in India. Yes, it is. And why you have said that some changes are, going on, because we are probably sitting in a very privileged room with good houses. God has, blessed us with so many things. We are happy and we are grateful to God that we are having such kind of life. But we are not yet able to gauge the plight of females who are actually suffering due to the myths, misconceptions, and misinformation related to menstruation. So I guess the audience who are connected with us today, they will not serve as dead end receiver of this information that we will be passing on through, but you become future, imparters of this particular information and education to each and every male, female human being that you meet. So I believe that this session of today will be a game changer, will be an eye opener, and I hope you all disseminate information in the way that it should be. And probably in near future, I will not be required for any sessions. You guys will be carrying on this responsibility with equal elan. So coming back to the topic, menstruation. Why do we menstruate? Very easy to tell. We menstruate because God has created this particular phenomena. So while a female menstruates every month, there is a purpose to it. The purpose here is to have or achieve a pregnancy. So while those who desire or those who wish for pregnancy, when they get pregnant, they kind of celebrate this moment. You know, a happy news, good news. So many movies are also made on this. While menstruation is not celebrated at all. So here I don't mean to say that we should be celebrating menstruation every time we menstruate. We should be telling aloud everyone that I'm menstruating today. No. But let's generate a normal conversation around it. Like the way we talk, what's your favorite dress? What would you like to eat today? So the same kind of conversation. Okay, are you menstruating today? Okay, yeah. So yes. So that thing. It can be a dining table conversation. It can be an office room conversation. So first and foremost, and the most important thing is to generate conversations around menstruation to normalize it. Then only the taboos can be washed off. And you always know that somebody has to, you know, take lead. Somebody has to come to forefront to make these changes, which are so much deep rooted. We always remember someone or the other who brought about this particular change. So let you be that person. Let you be remembered for this thing that you brought away, this change in the society. So yes, what is menstruation? It's a cycle based on lunar calendar. We all know lunar calendar consists of 28 days. So now girls, tell me who all remember a table of 7? I'm sure everyone. Tejaswini, you tell me, do you remember a table of 7?
Oh, yes, I do.
Good. So it's like 7 into 1 is 7, 7 into 2, 14, 7 into 3, 21, 7 into 4, 28, and 7 into 5 is 35. So you must have noticed that 7 is 1 week and 7 into 4, that is 28 days, is 1 month. And this is what lunar calendar is. So all you have to remember in order to understand what is normal menstruation, what is the frequency of normal cycle, is table of 7. So just remember 7 into 1 is 7, that is 1 week. 7 into 2 is equal to 14. It is the time when you ovulate, right? 7 into 3 is equal to 21. That's the shortest cycle normal that you can have. 7 into 4 is equal to 28. That is the average length of cycle that a female can have. And 7 into 5, that is 35, is the longest normal cycle that a female can have. So I will repeat. Thoda sa maths ho gaya, so it becomes complicated, especially for people like me who were weak in maths back then. So 7 into 1 is 1 week. 7 into 2, 14, is when we ovulate. And that's the average length or average duration. It does not mean that one will 100% ovulate at 14th day. But yes, that's the average time that we ovulate. 7 into 3 is 21. That is the shortest cycle length that we can have. 7 into 4 is 28. That is the average cycle length that a female should have. And 7 into 5, that is 35, is the longest duration of cycle that a female can have. And these are the permissible limits as per the medicine and biology. So suppose if one girl menstruated on 1st of June, she started menstruating on 1st of June. Again, she got her cycle on 21st of June. She needs not worry. This is normal. This is falling in the normal category of normal range. If one has menstruated on, say, June 1st, now she has got her period on June, say, 26th, normal. If she starts her period on, say, June 30th, normal. July 1st, normal. July 4th, normal. Till July 6th, it is normal. So 21 to 35 days is a normal permissible range of getting a cycle. Now the question is, can it be 21 days in this cycle, 28 days in next cycle, 32 days in next cycle, and so on? Can it keep on changing? So the answer is usually 99.9% no. We all are unique individuals. We all have unique bodies, and we are responding uniquely to all the hormones that we are composed of. So we are making a biological constituent with composition which is very, very unique to each of us. Same as Joe's, your menstrual cycle, your hormone levels, your responses to those cycles, to those hormone levels will be completely different from Miss Tejaswini's, from myself. Hormones are same, estrogen, progesterone. Our body is like same, human female anatomical body. Everything is same, but your cycle is different, her cycle is different, mine is different. But I know what my cycle is. So every female is having a unique menstrual cycle pattern, and that repeats on itself. For example, for me, it is 26 days. For some other girl, it might be 31 days. For some other, it might be dot 28 days. For some, it might be 30, 31, 32 days. So, but they know, okay, yes, 26th day onward, I will, I should start expecting that I will bleed, or 28 days. So whatever your pattern is, you know that, your body knows that. You have adopted yourself to that cycle pattern. So now the question is, I was bleeding regularly since my menarche every 28th days, yeah, 29th day, yeah, 26th or 27th day. So I knew okay, within 4 to 5 days of range, I do bleed. But suddenly I started bleeding, I start bleeding at 21st day. So there is a shift from that 28, 27, 26 days to 21 days. Or suddenly, if you notice that you were very comfortably bleeding every 32nd day, now suddenly you have started bleeding every 45th day. So this is the change in normal cycle frequency. However, normal ranges it may fall in, but it should warrant an attention or at least a counseling session with a gynecologist or a doctor who is well versed in dealing gynecological diseases. So what I meant to say is a change in your normal or regular cycle pattern should raise a bit suspicion that something might not be going on right. So this might be the first indication that you or your hormones are not synchronized with each other. Something has happened which has broken this delicate chain of synchronization, right? So I would like to request the audience to note down this particular thing, that although our cycle frequency ranges from 21 to 35 days, 21 least, 35 days max, but still if we experience any change which is falling even within this normal range, there is something to be that we should be taking care of. It's not like it is something very sinister, something very, very problematic, but yes, it might be the first indication that something may not be that right in our body right now. And maybe that's the primary indication of getting some attention. Maybe we do something that will correct the pathology which is going to take place. Second is, how many days should we bleed? Again, 7 to 1, that is 1 week. This is the normal duration that one should be bleeding. More than 7 days warrants an investigation, especially if you are bleeding for longer duration since your menarche, then certain pathologies like coagulation disorders, some defects in blood coagulation might be there. Again, I will emphasize that whatever I'm saying, it does not mean that it will happen. Yeah, wahi hai, and you go on and search through Google. Okay, Dr. Shaila said this, so I am suffering from this. There's nothing like that. But yes, one should be aware. So 7 into 1, that is 1 week. It is the normal and lengthiest duration that one should be bleeding for. So is there any lower limit also? Yes, lower limit is 1.5 to 2 days. Because as Tejaswini told in her opening remarks, menstrual blood, it is not actually menstrual blood, it is menstrual fluid. The lining of the uterine cavity, it comes down, and when it is coming down, it brings along with it some amount of blood also. So the fluid that you see is consisting of a lot of endometrial tissue, which is thick and slimy like. It is not red, it is brownish to dark brown in color, sometimes grayish in appearance, because it is our body's tissue. And yes, it is mixed with blood. So it is basically not very bright red, but yes, brownish red colored blood that we see in our menstrual fluid. So if you're bleeding for 1.5 to 2 days and maximum to 7 days, it is normal. Again, that point, that suppose you were bleeding for 4 to 5 days previously. Now suddenly your bleeding has reduced. You have started bleeding for just 2 days. Or suppose you were bleeding for 3 days and now suddenly you have started bleeding for 7 days. Although 2 days and 7 days are in normal range, but your pattern is not this. Your pattern was 3 days, your pattern was 4 days. Why it has changed? So that pattern change again should be brought to the notice of your caretakers, of maybe your parents, or maybe your doctor, whom you are comfortable with. So that is one thing. So again, I will say, repeat it again. If you're bleeding for 1.5 to 2 days to maximum of 7 days, it is normal. But yes, if you are suddenly experiencing some change in your bleeding pattern, like you have started bleeding for 15 days, there is spotting which is going on continuously for 7 to 10 days, or before you start menstruating, you start getting some sort of the spottings, brownish discharge. After that brownish discharge, 3 to 4 days, you start to bleed normally. Again, it is not normal. So this is happening because of basically progesterone deficiency, which we will talk later on about. So yes. Third thing is, for how much should we bleed? So some people say, as Deepa ma'am also said, that taboos are deeply enrooted in our society, especially when I was growing up. Girls used to, say it with pride that I bleed, I change my pad every 2 hours, every 3 hours. I bleed very heavily. It is cleaning my body like anything. That dirty blood, that impure blood is coming out of my body. I'm so happy. And and yes, luckily my father was a doctor, and my mother used to talk about this to me. She already told me about so many things. So I knew that this is not correct. In fact, one of my friends had to be admitted for this particular bleeding disorder, and then we were so aware about that entity at that time. So yes, how much should you bleed? So can we measure how much we are bleeding normally? Who can tell us that I'm bleeding 5 milliliters per day, or say 50 milliliters per cycle, or 80 milliliter per cycle? Because according to definition, 5 to 80 milliliter blood loss is expected. It is normal. So are we going to, get something into it and measure it? No. So what is the most acceptable definition of what is the normal bleeding, or what is the normal amount of bleeding? So any bleeding which does not create discomfort in your daily activity is normal. But again, I would like to emphasize over here is, don't take it if you are bleeding heavily, if you are passing clots, you are getting relieved of that dirty discharge or dirty impure blood from your body, and you are considering it as normal, you're happy about it, then you need to rethink about it. So if you tend to change your pad voluntarily after 4 to 6 hours, it is completely fine. So why I said voluntarily is, you're not forced to change after say 2 hours, 3 hours. If you are changing it every 3 to 4 hours, you are feeling every time you are doing some work on computer and you're feeling, oh, something has come out. It has drenched me. Maybe it has stained my underclothes also. Maybe I have stained that sofa I'm sitting on. So that kind of thought, if you're having that kind of bleeding, it is abnormal. Or sometimes when you're having ki, I don't need to change pad, even if I don't change it for 12 hours, there is only this much amount of blood, so it's okay for me, I bleed that day. Again, that is abnormal. So having too less of blood flow, which does not let you change your menstrual sanitation or pad in around 4 to 6 hours, is less. And when you are changing it more frequently than 4 to 6 hours, then it is more. Or if you are 24 hours 24/7 thinking about your bleeding, it is coming out, it is so wet now, I should leave this meeting ASAP and go and change my pad. If you're having those kind of thoughts, then your bleeding is more. And associated symptoms like weakness, giddiness, feeling of I want to sleep all the time, I'm not feeling good all the time. And yeah, if you are married and your husband is bearing the brunt in the form of चुप रहो तुम, मेरे से बात नहीं करो, मुझसे आज कोई बात नहीं करेगा, those kind of stuff, then you are bleeding more. Probably you are anemic. Or if you're not able to concentrate on your work, your boss has given you some projects to be completed by the weekend, and you're like, however hard I try, I cannot do this work. So you give up. Work performance is reduced, output productivity is reduced just because of this increased blood loss. So you need to pay attention to this aspect also. And the fourth important parameter that is associated with menstrual cycle is any associated symptoms. So the commonest, and it is thought that it is universal associated symptom, is pain. Pain in lower abdomen, and if it is more, we call it dysmenorrhea. That is painful menstruation. So as I said, it is the commonest associated symptom. So pain is there. And why pain is there? Because uterus is contracting itself in order to expel that cavity lining. And while it is contracting itself, making itself short, it leads to pain. Right? So this is kind of pain in heart that you see in movies, that once yes, Deepaji, you can launch a poll related to cramps. So you have seen in movies that mother comes and says that your daughter is in love with somebody and father has a heart attack, he is hospitalized. So that pain in heart or heart attack is like that thing, pain that we are having while menstruating. So as I said, it is the commonest problem associated. So many remedies for this painful menstruation are present. And I think Deepaji has done a lot of groundwork on this. And she has asked, how do you handle cramps, the throbbing pain in your abdomen, lower abdomen during periods? So it's a hot water bag, electric heating pad, cramp roll-on, relief patch, self-heating patch, painkillers, sleeping with cushion, ginger tea, home remedies, or hot shower or bath. So yes, you have to answer this question, and my answer will be very different. Yes, I have closed it from my side. I don't know for others. So yes, what should be the, as we will be seeing the result also, how do people tackle with this problem? So as I'm a gynecologist, majoritarily, I'm seeing patients coming with this problem, and they say that every time we get these painful menstruation, we pop a pill. We pop a painkiller. Sometimes somebody will say, they remember those names of those medicines so nicely कि कभी-कभी हमें भी doubt होता है कि अरे मतलब what a training. So they say, I've eaten Rotinam, I have eaten Meftal Spas, I have eaten Spurge, I have eaten this and that. Any type of, every type of drug they must be taking without even knowing that what are the proper indication of this particular drug, whether this particular combination is required for treating this simple menstrual cramp, or whether there are any side effects that we can suffer taking 1 or 2 tablets. It might appear to you that we are taking just 1 or 2 tablets per month. Will it affect us in the long run? So again, calculated for 15 to 20 years, every month you are taking 2 tablets for 12 months into 20 to 25 years, or whatever be the duration of menstrual cycle. So average nikaloge, to it will be this much amount, kgs of pills that you must have popped, and you must have tortured your kidney with an extra burden of taking them out. So many cases of kidney failure are coming just because people are taking painkillers left and right and center. So as the poll result is in front of me, hot water bag is the commonest remedy that is being used, again with the sleeping with cushions and painkillers or medicine that we are taking. So yes, hot water cushions or hot water bags are the most innocent things, and I think it's the most pleasure-giving activity that can be done while you're having dysmenorrhea. It is harmless, provided that the temperature is not too hot. because girls are coming with a lot of superficial burns, especially when when they are using electric heating pads and they don't know how to use it properly or what's the correct temperature, and we are seeing a lot of superficial burns on their tummies. So please be careful about this. But yes, you can use these hot water bags. They're wonderful. So what is this hot water bag doing? They're just drawing your attention away from that uterine pain to some super elevated feeling of heat on your periphery. So this is kind of science. So science may, you must have seen that when one is having headache, we apply a balm, and balm gives a lot of burning sensation. And if it inadvertently goes into your eyes start to produce a lot of tears. So it is so irritating to the skin that all the concentration from headache comes to this side. The same is happening with heating pads, with pain roll-ons, with electric heating pads, that the whole concentration, the pain perceptors, those nerves which were perceiving more pain from the uterus will now perceive a different feeling, which is pleasant now from superficial side of your tummy. So your brain will get signal ki, let me compare this uterine pain with this heating feeling that I'm getting. So pain will perceive, oh my God, this is good. This heating feeling is good. So let me give this person a signal ki, yes, your pain is nothing now and you're having a good feeling related to this. So this is the science behind application of heat and everything. And whatever one says, it improves blood circulation. You don't need to improve your blood circulation in your tummy area while you are menstruating. It is just a hoax or again a myth. So that's the simplest thing that you can explain yourself why you feel good when you are using heating pads. So what else can be done? Painkillers. So again, I would like to uh, force you to think what is the level of pain that you're experiencing on a scale of 0 to 10. So 0 to 3 is normal. Sometimes you may feel it, sometimes you may forget about it. If you're eating, you don't feel pain. If you're reading, you don't feel pain. From 4 to 7, it is moderate. You have to use, say, electric heating pads or cushions or pillows or something. It is there in your mind, but if you're using or distracting your mind in something, you don't need anything else. But yes, 8, 9, 10 is the level of pain that every time you have to pop a pill, you have to sometimes take injection, sometimes there is severe feeling of nausea and sometimes vomiting also. Then yes, this 7, 8, 9, 10 wala pain should never be ignored, because a disease entity known as endometriosis might be associated, or one might be suffering from that. And getting one simple opinion from a gynecologist is very important, because you might need not painkillers but different form of therapy, so that you may not experience this kind of severe dysmenorrhea or debilitating pain each time you menstruate. So not only does it brings a lot of physical discomfort, one is doubling up in bed every time she's menstruating, taking leave from, say, her workplace or educational institute. She's not talking to her family members. She's scolding her kids like anything. If one is married, having kids, or husband, or boyfriend, or friends, whoever be the person. So this is like physical suffering, emotional trauma, mental trauma, and that suffering is also profound. So those who are suffering from severe pain or endometriosis or dysmenorrhea will totally relate with this fact that their mental health is also suffering because of this pain. And again, the type of treatment that you're using for getting relief from this pain is doing a lot of harm to your body. So it is better that you seek proper medical attention for this, get yourself good and proper and apt prescription medications for this, and lead a good and happy life. So again, other associated features apart from dysmenorrhea or pain during menstruation are, some people may experience bloating, some may experience vomiting, nausea, headache, craving, increased appetite, decreased appetite, And again, as I said, everyone is unique. So everyone is having one's own associated menstrual pattern and associated features. In some cases, some people may feel slight pain in lower back, some may feel pain in inner areas of thigh. So it is like unique to you. They are just signals that hormones are getting washed off now, and the uterus is about to menstruate or shed its endometrial lining. So better be prepared. So, yes, Deepaji, I would like to halt here for few seconds, few minutes. If there are any questions regarding understanding of normal menstrual cycle, what are the trigger or red flag signs, and dysmenorrhea, I will be happy to take over here itself.
Sure, Dr. Sheila. Let me ask you the first question myself. Young girls and young
Yes.
women, some of them cannot miss college classes or office meetings, even on their first day of period. So, what is the best option, best or safest option that you would suggest for such scenarios?
Why should they miss their meetings or schools or colleges?
No, if they are having too much pain, but they
Yes.
cannot be at home, what is the safest option? Because hot water bag and home remedies is not an option at that time if they are in the office. So at that time, most people go for the pill,
Yeah.
right?
So as I said, if it is that debilitating that you need to take pills or you need to be absent from your workplace, you should get yourself evaluated from a gynecologist, because not only endometriosis in sexually active females, it is pelvic inflammatory disease, sometimes fibroids, and sometimes tuberculosis of the genital tract also, that leads to severe and debilitating, and if not severe, moderate pain also. So some amount of pain is say and see inevitable, but moderate to severe variety needs medical intervention. It needs to be evaluated by one is having. And as I said earlier also, prescription drugs are different for each kind of pain. Maybe you are suffering from PID and you just take an antibiotic course and it gets resolved. Maybe one is suffering from endometriosis and some sort of long-term treatment is required in the form of hormonal suppression, because in that case pain will not be relieved with moderate or normal doses of painkillers. You might need to take higher amounts of dosages, and again, it takes a toll on kidney. But yes, if you ask me, one carry in the pocket kind of thing, pain patches are very handy. As I said, they distract your mind, so you can apply pain patches. They're just equivalent to that balm kind of thing. So you can apply that. And last thing should be a painkiller.
Yes, very rightly said, ma'am. I myself use the self-heating patch. There are new products available in the market that you can explore and find which one works best for you. Especially these kind of patches and roll-ons and all are portable. So even if you're not at home, you can quickly go to the bathroom and use them. So thank you so much.
Yes. And one thing I would like to tell over here is I'm sure everyone must be knowing about fenugreek or methi seeds. So if you're into tea and warm fluids intake, like if you believe, because many girls don't like, they are totally a kind of thumbs up, taste the kind of thing, or lemonades or something like that. But yes, if you are into hot waters or hot fluids, you like that, then methi dana or fenugreek seeds can be boiled for a minute or two, and that can be sipped, because that contains first and foremost insulin, which is very helpful in treating PCOS also. And second, it has natural painkillers, again, which help in getting this pain relief. And finally, there are some mind distracting activities which one can resort to, like please try it. And I would like to have a genuine feedback over this. Whatever you like, whatever you love, just close your eyes for a minute or two and think, what's the thing that can give you maximum happiness at this time? Suppose it is listening to a song, listen to that song. So mild to moderate kind of pain, and I have done a research paper on this, which I'll be sharing later on also. So mild to moderate pain gets relieved on doing any sort of activity which brings happiness inside you. Because when you are happy, when you are thinking of something which gave you happiness in the past, or which you always associate with happiness, that releases a lot of endorphins. Endorphins are natural painkillers. So, and they are released with each single bout. The amount of endorphin is released, which is equivalent to 650 milligram of paracetamol. So it is that strong, but you need to believe it. So, and that pleasure giving exercise or activity may be eating a piece of pizza also, and listening to music, maybe dancing, exercise, drawing, sketching, anything. So you can resort to that. So I will, if you permit, I will come to second segment because I have noted down what I have to talk about. Yes. Deepa ji, I need your permission.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. So second thing is about PCOS, and I am forced to talk about PCOS because every girl, every second girl in my OPT is coming with a paper like this. Madam, I'm suffering from PCOS, treat me. So they're throwing their paper on me. Somebody has diagnosed PCOS for them. Sometimes they have diagnosed PCOS in themselves, and now they want a little help from doctors like us that maybe something better. So we have already searched in Google. We already know we are suffering from PCOS. If you have any option, then suggest us. So that kind of scenario. So please, 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 PCOS and making a diagnosis of PCOS is not that simple. It's not that simple that you have some cyst in your ultrasound and you're suffering from PCOS. No. So there are three things that you need to look for. One is disturbance in menstrual cycle. Your menstrual cycles are either very, very infrequent, they're coming, say, at a period of 3 months, 2 months, more than 35 days, or there is complete absence of menstruation. That is one thing. Second thing is you are experiencing too much or disturbing hair growth. It may be on upper lips, it may be on chin, it may be on this side, it may be on hands, it may be on legs, it may be on your tummy or around the nipple area. So if you're experiencing recent new onset increased facial or body hair growth, that is one thing. Associated with this is a lot of acne, a lot of oily skin, a lot of hair loss, right? So if you're having, this is known as hyperandrogenism or hyperandrogenemia. So that is second point. And third point is if you're having small cysts which are less than 1 centimeter in ultrasound, either one or both the ovaries, that is polycystic ovarian morphology of ovary, then out of these three, if you're having two criteria, either menstrual cycle abnormality or hirsutism, or menstrual cycle abnormality with polycystic ovarian morphology on ultrasound, or menstrual cycles are completely normal, you're just having lot of hair growth, lot of acne, along with ovaries having lot of cyst, or you're not having any hair growth, but yes, you're having menstrual cycle irregularity and ultrasound detects cyst in your ovaries, then two out of these three criteria, if they are fulfilled, that is one thing. Along with that, you need to rule out 4 diseases, that is disorders of thyroid gland, disorders of prolactin glands, drugs, any drugs. So there are so many drugs which can alter your menstrual cycle, which can lead to increased facial hair growth, which can lead to appearance of cyst in ovaries. And final is C, that is Cushing and congenital adrenal hyperplasia. So this may appear to be a medical jargon, but you need to know it. When you can know about PCOS, you can know about Cushing and Carr syndrome also. So ask your doctor whether you have ruled out these 4 things: disorders of thyroid, disorders of prolactin, drugs, and C, that is Carr and Cushing syndrome. So if these 4 are ruled out and 2 out of these 3 anything is present, then only you are PCOS. So it's not that simple. just having some menstrual abnormalities, PCOS, no. And then you start popping hormonal pills, do a lot of damage to your body. After 4 to 5 years, come to a doctor and tell कि हमने उससे भी लिया था, ये भी किया था. We have done everything, but we're not getting treated. So why does it happen? It happens because of essentially lifestyle disturbances. And for that, two main things are important. One is our diet, loss of physical activity. There may be less of physical activity. And second thing is sleeping after 12 in the midnight. So this may appear that oh, majority of us are doing that, we have to do that, that is the demand of our job. No, it's not demand of your job. It's your mismanagement of time which forces you to sleep after 12 midnight. Just give me a second. Like this, Gecha, sleeping after 12 is dangerous. So yes, it is dangerous. It changes the entire physiology, the entire hormonal milieu. You must have heard about one word, that is diurnal variation, morning and evening variation. So this holds true for every hormone that is being produced in your body. God created us, the rotation of earth, moon, sun, everything in a manner so that we do our work in the morning hours or daytime and sleep at night. So midnight was never decided for us that we will not be sleeping at that time. So not only we are sleeping past 12, we are sleeping at 1, we are sleeping at 2, but also we are exposing our eyes to a lot of light. So light may be in the form of this normal tube light, LED light, or in the form of the light that you're getting from your mobile. So your eyes are getting exposed to this light from mobile, and the pineal gland over here perceives that it is not the time to take rest, heal, and rejuvenate. So pineal gland is a nocturnal gland which works optimally only when lights are closed. Tabhi, there was a concept that you should be closing or switching off your lights while you're sleeping. So this pineal gland is perceiving that no, light is there. It's not time to sleep. It's not time to take rest. And imagine you are making that pineal gland overwork beyond its working hours. Its biological clock is disturbed, so that healing, rejuvenation, and repair of the body is disturbed. It is gone. So that is why premature aging, premature menopause, PCOS, hormonal disturbances, and menstrual cycle disturbances, and in extreme cases, infertility, that is inability to bear a child, is this is the root cause. So lifestyle, I need not tell, because if I ask 50 people over here, they will be telling me that we should be eating this, we should be eating that, this food is harmful, this food is harmless, vegetables are good, fruits are good, milk is good, we should sleep early, we should do exercise, we should do 4 times walk. They will be telling better than me, but they're not doing it, right? So not doing it is lack of motivation. So you need this M factor, that is motivation, so that your M, that is menstruation, is normal. So be motivated to pursue and follow what you know. You already know everything, just follow it. And one advice from my side, sleep before 11 or at around 11. Close your lights, switch off your lights, let your pineal gland rest, and you'll be having better and more glowing skins, maybe better hair health, better hormonal health, and better menstrual health, and better sexual and reproductive life if you're following this particular advice, which may appear to be a bit difficult at this time, but not impossible. So that is one thing. And yes, PCOS, can it be treated? Since you manufactured this disease by altering your lifestyle, by altering your diet, by altering your sleep pattern, so it's only you who can reverse it. So it was something like our phone, suppose, it can be flipped and covered like this, right? You kept it uncovered, or you opened its cover, right? So it is only you who can bring it back to cover it back. So PCOS, if you ask me, is it treatable? It is this thing. इसमें treatment का कोई fundamental ही नहीं है. So the way you uncovered this disease, you have to cover this disease by yourself. There are certain remedies, there are certain medicines which will help you in bringing this disease back to its normal form. Otherwise, if you ask me PCOS, what is PCOS? I've already told you it's not a disease. It's a symptom complex. You're having this, maybe due to so many things. And what are those things? For me, it may be a diet change. For you, it may be increase in weight. For you, maybe it may be a loss of physical activity, or for some, it may be stretching their sleep hours beyond in the late midnight, or they're sleeping at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. due to work, due to whatever reason they might cite or quote. So it's you who have to bring it back. The doctors are there. First, let them diagnose whether you are having PCOS or not. And then after certain investigations and proper workup of your metabolic function, they will help you in getting back to from where you started. So never ever treat PCOS by yourself also. But yes, one thing that you can do by yourself is get back to your traditional dietary systems, get back to your traditional physical activity, and get back to your traditional sleeping patterns. Early to bed, early to rise. Nursery mein hi we heard it, and nursery mein probably we left it. This is some rhyme only, but this is not rhyme. This is the reason. So you should build up that reason, and you should live with that reason. Early to bed and early to rise. And so true. It makes a man, if not wealthy, if not wise, but yes, healthy. So healthy, so I can vouch for that this brings. So third thing that we will be talking about is menstruation sanitation and its options. We all know new age solutions for menstruation sanitation are reusable cloth pads. So it is a sort of designer version of the cloths that are probably granddaddies and nannies they use. So it has been redesigned and innovated. Second is menstrual cup, extremely good product for the girls who are sexually active, because then they have less discomfort. Yes, Deepaji, you can launch. Then you have less discomfort in maintaining, like inserting in and taking it out. And menstrual cups are good for adolescents, and like if you are comfortable, then those who are not yet sexually active, even they can use menstrual cup. Tampons is another brilliant option, but to me, it should be biodegradable, not that plastic wala that we are using. And single-use sanitary pads, yes, they're good. They brought revolution in the practices of menstrual sanitation. A lot of issues were there when people were using cloth pads which were from home, which they used to wash, not dry them up in sun and use it again. So it led to a lot of reproductive tract infections, urinary tract infections, probably infertility, ectopic pregnancy, chronic lower abdomen pain, we call it CPP or chronic pelvic pain, and so many things. So the quality of life is compromised. So you have these four options in front of you. Apart from that, labial pads and period panties, panty liners, everything is available. So you just have to, this is a basket, right? This is menstrual hygiene management basket, and you can choose your product according to the suitability. But yes, a word of caution about single-use sanitary pads, which are commercially available, which we have been using since last 10 to 15 years, since our menstruation started, that they bring a lot of damage to the environment, because they're made up of the materials which are not biodegradable. So probably they are not degrading themselves in say 6,000 to 8,000 years. And who has seen this 6,000 or 8,000 years? So probably when we will be reborn as dinosaurs and the earth will be back to green, abhi symptoms to aise lag rahe hain ki dinosaurs will come back with this COVID-19 finishing off everything. So then also you'll find those pads that you're using today. They're lying there. So just a word of caution about sanitary pads, that however convenient they may seem, as I can see, a whopping 96% is using the sanitary pads. And yes, I will not blame you, because we were not aware about anything else, and we were not aware about the pros and cons of using these pads. But yes, lot many products are available which are environmental friendly also, which are not harsh on your body, and which are not harsh on earth also. So you can think of those options also. So but the choice is yours, and whatever product or whatever option you are using, there is one thing, that anything that you are inserting or applying to your vulva, the area from finally the blood comes out, it should be changed in 4 to 6 hours. Blood is a very good culture medium for bacteria. Along with that blood, that fluid, that moist environment is a very good breeding ground for fungus. So if you're keeping your menstruation sanitation product there for longer than 4 to 6 hours, it becomes a breeding ground for bacteria and for fungus. So if you want to protect yourself from those organisms, which are causative organisms for creating itching sensation in vulvovaginal region, which are responsible for a lot of foul smelling discharge, which is responsible for chronic lower abdomen pain, feeling of fever, and that silently damages our reproductive tract system. Please change your products every 4 to 6 hours. And if you're using reusable cloth pad or menstrual cups, as I saw, some people are using it. So you need to be cautious about their cleaning system as well. You should be following proper instructions, especially if you're using anything that is made up of cloth. It has to be sun dried. So it should not be like rainy season is there, you have washed your cloth pads and you have dried them up with blowers or iron. Never do that. Sun or sunlight, it consists of UV rays, which is the most potent, most natural, most economical, and best sanitizer. So dry your clothes, your underpants, even your undergarments in sunlight, direct sunlight. So never dry your panties, your undergarments, your underpants layered under your jeans, layered under your t-shirt, because you are so conscious, you are so ashamed of drying them up directly under sunlight. Somebody will see that you are wearing a panty. Oh my God, how can it be possible? A girl wearing a panty and she is washing it and drying it out in the sun. What character? So please let people not decide your character based on what clothes you are taking out to dry out in sun. Come out of that age, at least we all can, right? So dry your clothes, dry your underclothes in direct sunlight. Third thing, I would like to talk about a bit about nutrition as well, because the topic is incomplete without that. So when you ask me, because this must be my 600th lecture that I have taken. So if I take questions, first question that comes to me is, Madam, what is the diet or foods that we should be taking during menstruation, and what are the foods that we should be avoiding during menstruation? And this question, this is the most hated question from my side. Menstruation is not a disease. It should not let you stop from eating anything in the world, right? And it should not be a time when you should be eating something you don't like. Suppose if I say drink neem leaves boiled in water, it is very good. Will you like torture yourself that much that you should be drinking neem leaves just because I said it is good in periods? And why it should be good? Why you should be needing that? So periods are normal, like your normal days. It's like menstruation. Menstruation is as normal as any other body function is. Do you say, "Ki, what should I be avoiding while I'm urinating? Do you say, what should I be avoiding while I'm sleeping or playing? So it is that normal. So there are no period days. There are just days in your life. some with some bodily function and some with some bodily function, right? There is just, you be aware that you are not anemic. Maybe you have lost so much of blood, you are suffering from abnormal uterine bleeding that you have lost blood, so you may feel a bit giddy. So just get your hemoglobin checked. So some deficiencies which are rampant to the tune of 95 to 97% in Indian females is anemia, that is hemoglobin deficiency, vitamin D deficiency, and sometimes calcium deficiency and all. But again, that does not mean that you should be going on and keeping on pills of vitamin D. And somebody said this particular capsule is very good, eat this, you will glow like anything. Somebody will say, my friend was really benefited from this brand of drug, take this. No self prescription, no self medication, please. That brings more harm than good. So yes, get your hemoglobin level checked. It is just as simple as a prick examination. 2 minutes, results are out, your hemoglobin is this. Go to a doctor, which is the best modality to treat this particular degree of anemia. Maybe you're just 10, your hemoglobin is 10.5, and maybe you just need some dietary modification. You don't need any iron supplement at all. So why you should be taking it? So just have a consultation regarding this also. So if you ask me period food, there is no period food, please. Periods are as normal as your another body days. If something comforts you more, it's your choice. You can take, like I love drinking tea every, say, 2 to 3 hours. So I drink a lot of tea. Maybe somebody likes coffee, so maybe you can have a lot of coffee. And in fact, these warm fluids, that is coffee, tea, and hot lemon water or whatever you're drinking, they act as mild diuretic. So you tend to feel to pee more after having these fluids. So two things should be taken care of while you're having these kind of fluid is, one, you need to have a lot of water so that you're not dehydrated. And second, it reduces bloating because it is taking out excess body fluid that was accumulated under the influence of progesterone. So it is draining out that fluid also. So it is good. But you need to take care of your dehydration. You should not be excessively dehydrated. And yes, foods like jaggery, foods like drumstick, food, they are rich in iron, we all know. Dates and peanuts, they are rich in iron. Egg yolk is rich in iron. Try to have those more, and not just during periods, every time in your entire life, till the time we have come, till the time we will be going. Have these foods in your diet. And if you ask me special things that should be incorporated, because yes, I have also done this nutrition science wala thing. So two foods that I like to recommend to everyone is sesame seeds, white sesame seeds. You take it without roasting or grinding or without boiling or without any modification. Just have a teaspoonful, maybe on alternate days, after 2 days or some days, whenever you get the time or whenever you remember, yes, sesame seeds are there, just pop few sesame seeds. They're excellent source of calcium, and that too, highly bioavailability is present in those sesame seeds. And second thing is flax seeds. You can take it in ground form along with salads, or again as a tea. You may give it a bit of boiling effect, and you may just chew it, you may roast it. So any form. So flax seeds are very good because yes, again, they improve insulin resistance. That those flax seeds improves digestion. They're excellent source of fibers and other nutritional substances. So these two foods. Rest of the foods, I'm sure you must be knowing it better than me. In fact, doctors are usually deficient in diet and sleep. So if I'm giving a lecture right now in my diet, ask me when did I have my lunch, or ask me when I will be having my dinner. Maybe I'll get a call in half an hour and I have to go and do some operation, and I come back at 12:30. So, but till the time you can manage these things, try to utilize every opportunity to eat normal food with your family, home cooked, and which is prepared with love. And last thing, never ever shun or abandon desi ghee, especially if you are taking it at home, like you're making it at home. So one teaspoonful of desi ghee in your dal, in your rice, in your chapati. Again, don't cook it. Don't fry anything on it or in it. You just apply it anywhere and have it. So it is excellent source of vitamin D, and probably we Indians survive because of desi ghee. So don't shun it. It's your best friend. And last word about cancers and prevention, although I may seem to have been overshooting. Do I have time or I have to wrap it around? Deepaji or Tejaswini, please tell me.
I think we are good to go ahead.
Okay, so just a few words about prevention of cancers, because females are sitting and I don't want to lose this opportunity to talk about cancers and how can we prevent it. So as we all know, the commonest cancer in females is breast cancer. And number two is cancer of cervix, that is mouth of uterus. So while breast cancer, breast is an external organ. It is visible to us externally. So you unclothe yourself, see yourself in mirror, breast will be visible to you. So who can get it? So if you ask me this question, the answer is whoever is having breast can get breast cancer. So it's as good who is having eyes can have eye cancer or something like that. But no, it is not like that. It is the commonest cancer occurring with very frequent intervals, like every fourth minute we are diagnosing one case of cancer breast. So it is that rampant. And if you ask me about eye cancer, 1 in 10,000 people are getting that. So it's not same. If you are having eyes, ye ho jayega. If you are having nose, ye ho jayega. No. Breast cancer is very common. Second thing is, since it is a disease of later age group, so many comorbidities are there that it leads to compounding of this disease. So yes, who gets it more? Because everyone is having breast, every female, and it is not happening with everyone. Who are at increased risk? So first is those who are having a sedentary lifestyle, having high weight, obesity, those who are taking diet which is excessively incorporating fats and oils in it. Third, those who are deficient in vitamin A, vitamin D. Fourth, some sort of genetic and familial breast cancers are prevalent are the people. And fifth, those who are getting some kind of hormonal treatment. So if you're taking hormones, just ask your doctors whether any associated risk factors for breast cancer is present in this or not, right? So these are 5 common things which are responsible for increased incidence of breast cancer. So as you all know, India is divided into 2 categories. One is urban sector, one is rural sector. Breast cancer is majoritarily seen in urban sector because of the things I said. And you will say now, okay, then people living in village should not be getting any cancer because they are having less pollution, they're having green leafy vegetables, they're having jaggery and whatever you have just told me, madam. They're having everything like that. But kindly remember, they're having poor hygiene, they're having more number of children, they're cooking their food on smokes, which we are not, right? They are deficient in some types of diets which we privileged people are having. That is why. And fifth and foremost thing is, even if they have some problem, they have limited access to healthcare facilities. So that is why some kind of cancers are more common in rural areas, and those are cancer of cervix, cancer of mouth, lungs. They are more common in this area because of the reasons that I have just mentioned. So cancer is at both places. Here it is more in breast, here it is more in cervix, but again it is mixed. It's not like rural people will not get breast cancer and urban people will not get cancer of cervix. So now uh, what is cervix? I'll draw and show. So you might have seen uterus is like this. So it is taught in books also. I hope I'm visible with this thing. So this is the mouth of cervix. This is the lining of uterus, which sheds, which is forming every month, and it is getting out in the form of menstrual fluid through this cervix every month. So if you get pregnant, your baby is developing over here, and baby is delivering through this mouth, and this is vagina, and this is the sexual or copulating organism. Penis comes here while intercourse. So this is vagina, and this is cervix, and this is uterus. As I said, breast is an external organ. You can see it by yourself. Cervix is not an internal organ. It needs to be examined, especially we cannot examine our cervix by ourselves. So you need somebody who knows how to inspect cervix. There is a specialized device which opens vagina apart so that we can look how the cervix looks like, right? So I have told you about what are the risk factors for cancer of breast. Same way, risk for cancer of cervix can be anything, but the most important is getting infection by a virus known as human papilloma virus, that is HPV, human papilloma virus. So who gets it? The people who are sexually active gets it from their sexual partners. So now again, sex is a universal phenomena. It's a normal biological and basic human instinct. And more than instinct, why would not one do sex, right? So for everyone who is doing sex is at risk of having human papilloma virus. How do we escape? We escape, one, by building up our immunity. So this virus which infects the cells of cervix will take around 10 to 15 years to develop into cancer. So if at any point of time, there can be two things. One, it is getting washed away. Anytime you have good immunity, virus is there, your immunity washes it away anytime. But again, if your immunity drops down for a day or two, you are ill, somebody is having diabetes, someone is taking medicine which decrease your immunity, then that virus can become more malignant. It goes down deeper into your cells and become pre-malignant. Maybe after 6 to 7 years, it becomes malignant, and malignant means cancer. So pre-cancerous or cancerous lesion, but it takes generally a period of 10 to 14 years. So that is one, I must say, good point about cancer cervix, that it can be detected earlier. So 10 to 14 years, one female is having for getting herself screened for this kind of cancer. So as I said, how can it be prevented? One is by immunity. You all know how immunity is built up. I've already told, diet, lifestyle modification, and sleeping early. Second is maintaining hygiene. Why to, right, to have a infection, bacterial infection, which is already damaging those cells and making it a home for those virus or viruses to attack it more in more frequency. So maintain hygiene. Don't let those bacteria and fungus destroy your cervical cells so that virus can affect more vehemently and more violently those cervical cells. Third is limiting number of sexual partners, because if you are having, and even if you're having one sexual partner, right, and that sexual partner is having multiple sexual relationship, for you he may be single, but for him there may be multiple, and he is bringing everybody's HPV strain to you. So maintaining this kind of fidelity is important. And here I'm not taking any moral science or moral value class, simply science. Limit number of sexual partners, because you never know which cross infection you are bringing, to which HPV your body might be reacting badly. So it's better to avoid multiple sexual partners, both the sides. Even I should not be having multiple sexual partners, and I should not be transmitting this disease to my partner, right? So that thing. And final is getting yourself enrolled into screening programs. Screening in India still is starting at the age of 21 years. In Western world, it has they have brought up the age of screening, that is 25 years. So every 3 years, if you are getting yourself examined by pap screen, every 5 years, if you are getting yourself by HPV DNA, direct test for, go for testing of DNA present well and good, nahi present, routine screening, right? Third thing is, which is the very basic preventive methodology, is getting yourself vaccinated. So you get vaccinated before you start your sexual debut, because if you have have started your sexual activity already, human papilloma virus is there. So it's better that before you get sensitized by this HPV, you get yourself vaccinated by HPV in the form of vaccine. It starts from age of 9 to 13, can be taken up till age of 25 or 26, although benefits are doubtful. And now there are some studies that are saying that till age of 45 also, it confers some protection, but robust data is not available. So we may be like, if you ask me, I'm 27, sexually active, mother of two, shall I be taking HPV vaccine? So it's your will. We don't know whether it will bring any good to you, any harm to you, but we can always take the benefit of doubt. So it's a decision which is made by joint sharing of ideas, and yes, under the background of existing evidence and research and data that we are having. So cancer cervix can be prevented by vaccination, by limiting number of sexual partners, by, and yes, if you're having multiple sexual partners, then usage of barrier protection, that is condom, and screening by pap smear, by high degree of awareness and maintaining good immunity. So now, how to detect breast cancer? Breast self-awareness is very important. It is very rare that you will find breast cancers in girls who are younger than 40 years or 35 years, until unless there is family history of breast cancer. But yes, one should be aware of any changes that are occurring in the breast in one's body. So you should know every time you check your breast, maybe breast self-awareness time, uh, every time you menstruate, after you take uh, like bath, you stand in front of mirror, examine yourself, see your breast, what is the condition, are there any untoward skin changes, any pigmentation, eversion of nipple, or the texture of the skin has changed. Try to note it down. Then touch your breast, all the quadrants, with the flat of these three fingers, starting from one side to another, not leaving any area in this circular fashion, or you may do it like this also. The idea is just not to leave any part of the breast while you palpate. So you don't have to palpate your breast like this. You will have something in your hand, because breast is fatty tissue and containing lot of glands. So glands may feel to be lumpy. So don't palpate it like this, palpate it like this. So if you feel any lump by this kind of touching sensation, then it is actually lump. Then clinical breast examination can be done in 2 years, 3 years by a trained clinician, your doctor, gynecologist, or surgeon, or oncologist, whoever you choose. And finally, mammography. You should know that after 40, you can get one mammography done. After 45, you should get one mammography done. And after 50 years, you have to get mammography done. So it is 40, 45, 50. In India, we lack a structured breast cancer screening program. We are following the guidelines that we have deciphered from Western world. So their guidelines are like this, whatever I have just told. 40 you can, 45 you should, and for 50 years you must. So mammography is a harmless screening X-ray. There are no untoward increased dosages, because some people are really scared that why to get X-ray done, it again increases risk of cancer. There is no such thing. So yes, and the girls who are less than 40 years and they suspect something in their breast, either by themselves or there are some symptoms, some changes, then ultrasound also is a good modality. At least it helps you in finding other suspicious pathologies, and later on MRI can be done to rule out things. And yes, I just a question flashed in the chat box. Oh, we wash, no. And if you ask me a reason, I have 1000 reasons. One thing that I would like to tell is vagina is self-cleansing organism. It has a lot of discharge inside it, which has been created by our body to clean it. So you don't need to be after vagina's life. Leave it alone. Just maintain basic hygiene associated with your body, right? Just one word of caution, never wash your perineal area from backwards to front. That is from the area of anal region to urethral or vaginal region. Always wash it from front to backwards. So no V-wash, no fancy products, no deodorants. Second is there is an HPV vaccine available that needs to be taken before 19 years age. Or yes, I think I have covered that aspect. How can we control, reduce extreme thoughts and mood swings? See, extreme in itself is indicating that you need some sort of evaluation. If one is experiencing extreme mood swings, extreme thought changes, or something like that, so please go and visit doctor, because you must have heard about PMS, that is premenstrual syndrome. So premenstrual syndrome is sort of obsolete now. We are calling it as premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So what is that? If you're having extreme thought changes, extreme mood swings, you're not able to control your emotions, your anger, your love, feeling for love, craving for love. You're always thinking about something during menstruation or just before menstruation. It is known as premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and it is a diseased entity noted by ICD code 10. So if you're having that, first and foremost, you need to identify that yes, I'm having this problem. And second, you need to understand that you have to get yourself evaluated, probably by a gynecologist or by a counselor, and in extreme cases by a psychiatrist also. Again, please girls, this is not a taboo. So if anyone is suffering from extreme PMS or extreme PMDD, it's not in her control. It's the hormones which are playing havoc. So they need to be treated. It's not somebody's fault that somebody is having PMDD. The important thing is to get it treated so that further quality of life is not compromised. Yes. Is it true that usage of menstrual cups breaks hymen? So let us break this hymen taboo also. So new age girls, please don't limit yourself to virginity concept residing in somebody's hymen. Even if it breaks hymen, so what? Second thing is it does not break hymen, right? Only you should be comfortable in choosing the right size of the cup. Otherwise, hymen itself is a bit is a stretchy membrane. So even if the cup is going that, first and foremost, you need not insert cup that high. It is just a blood collecting device. So it will come out of that hymen and the blood will be collected or fluid will be collected. So it's just matter of comfort. And third thing is, even if it is breaking hymen or no hymen, what, how does that matter, right? So yes, normal water is enough to wash, and likewise you clean your body using soap. Any non-fragmented, non-fragranced, fragmented bol rahi hu because we are using so many scientific terminologies. So non-fragranced soap. You don't need to use any soap which is so strong smelling like santoor or anything like that. So use mild soaps like pears, which are very, very mild, having normal pH. Wash your perineal area when you are taking bath, and that's it. Every time you go for urinating, wash yourself with plain water. That's it. So, can a person with cervix prolapse use cup? No, it is difficult for them to use cup. They may. I'm not saying they cannot use cup. They can use cup, but they need a larger fitting size cup. They have to reduce their prolapse and then insert the cup. So yes, they can use. Is it okay to use menstrual cup by 12 to 13 years old? It depends. If that 12 to 13 years old bacha is comfortable using cups, you can. So it all depends on education and how you introduce it. Introduce to the bacha, to the kid, that this is menstrual cup, this is how it should be used. So it is better if they start using reusable cloth pads first, so that they may become aware of their body fluid, what the blood looks like, and then gradually the menstrual cup is introduced to them. So it is not contraindicated. It's just your level of comfort with cups and how you want to get yourself acquainted with it. So I think I've answered the questions as well. So any more things I would like to clarify? And then I think it's already 6:20.
So first of all, thanks Dr. Shaila for introducing us to all these instructions regarding menstrual hygiene and menstrual lifestyle. Probably this can make us consider menstruation as normal as our daily routine and also carry it in a more conscious way. And thanks to all the participants and your interactions, probably when you can open up and ask such questions, it can answer to many people around us. So first of all, as a representative of Pinkish Foundation, I thank Diana for inviting us and conducting this session. And thanks to Deepa ma'am for continuously coordinating with us and putting up this session. Over to you, Deepa ma'am, for the thank you address.
Hi, Tejaswini. One of our mentees from Tokaj Hub, Ms. Anakha, would be delivering the vote of thanks. On my behalf and on Prayana's behalf, Dr. Shaila, very good session. Amazing, amazing insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure and honor as well.
Over to you, Anakha.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So on behalf of Talk Hub, I would like to thank Dr. Shaila Jaman from Pinkish Foundation for giving us such a great session on menstruation hygiene and menstruation cycle and all. And I would like to thank Tejaswini for answering the whole session and also all the participants who actively participated and also for making and helped us for making this event a successful one. Thank you.
So Deepa ma'am, are we good to wind up the session?
Yes, please. Thank you, Tejaswini.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.